Today we're going to be reading the story Turkeys by Bailey White. This is a personal essay. Something about my mother attracts ornithologists. It all started years ago when a couple of them discovered she had a rare species of woodpecker coming to her bird feeder. They came in the house and sat around the window, exclaiming and taking pictures with big fancy cameras. But long after the red cockeyed woodpeckers had gone to roost, the ornithologists were still there. There always seemed to be 3 or 4 of them wandering around our place and staying for supper. In those days, during the 1950s, the big concern of ornithologists in our area was the wild turkey. They were rare, and the pure strain wild turkeys had begun to interbreed with farmers' domestic stock. The species was being degraded. It was extinction by dilution, and to the ornithologist it was just as tragic as the more dramatic demise of the passenger pigeon or the Carolina parakeet. One ornithologist had devised a formula to compute the ratio of domestic to pure strain wild turkey in an individual bird by comparing the angle of flight at takeoff and the rate of acceleration. And in those sad days, the turkeys were flying low and slow. It was during that time, the spring when I was 6 years old, that I caught the measles. I had a high fever, and my mother was worried about me. She kept the house quiet and dark and crept around silently, trying different methods of cooling me down. Even the ornithologist stayed away, but not out of fear of the measles or respect for a household with sickness. The fact was they had discovered a wild turkey nest. According to the formula, the hen was pure strain wild, not a taint of the sluggish domestic bird in her blood, and the ornithologists were camping in the woods, protecting her nest from predators and taking pictures. One night our phone rang. It was one of the ornithologists. "Does your little girl still have the measles?" he asked. "Yes," said my mother. "She's very sick. Her temperature is 102. "I'll be right over," said the ornithologist. In 5 minutes, a whole carload of them arrived. They marched solemnly into the house, carrying a cardboard box. 102, did you say? Where is she?" they asked my mother. They crept into my room and set the box down on the bed. I was barely conscious, and when I opened my eyes, their worried faces hovering over me seemed to float out of the darkness like giant glowing eggs. They snatched the covers off of me, and it felt me all over. They consulted in whispers. "Feels just right, I'd say." 102. Can't miss if we tuck them up close and she lies still. I closed my eyes then, and after a while the ornithologists drifted away, their pale faces bobbing up and down on the black wave of fever. The next morning I was better. For the first time in days I could think of. The memory of the ornithologists with their whispered voices was like a dream from another life. But when I pulled down the covers, there, staring up at me with googly eyes and wide mouths, were 16 fuzzy baby turkeys, and the cracked chips and caps of 16 brown speckled eggs. I was a sensible child. I gently stretched myself out. The eggshells crackled, and the turkey babies fluttered and cheeped and snuggled against me. I laid my aching head back on the pillow and closed my eyes. "The ornithologist," I whispered. "The ornithologists have been here." It seems the turkey hen had been so disturbed by the elaborate protective measures that had been undertaken on her behalf that she had abandoned her nest on the night the eggs were due to hatch. It was a cold night. The ornithologists, not having an incubator on hand, used their heads and came up with the next best thing. The baby turkeys and I gained our strength together. When I was finally able to get out of bed and feebly creep around the house, the turkeys peeped and cheeped around my ankles, scrambling to keep up with me and tripping over their own big spraddle-toed feet. When I went outside for the first time, the turkeys tumbled after me down the steps and scratched around in the yard while I sat in the sun. Finally, in late summer, the day came when they were ready to fly for the first time as adult birds. The ornithologists had gathered. I ran down the hill, and the turkeys ran too. Then, one by one, they took off. They flew high and fast. The ornithologists made V's with their thumbs and forefingers, measuring angles. They consulted their stopwatches and paced off distances. They scribbled in their tiny notebooks. Finally, they looked at each other. They sighed. They smiled. They jumped up and down and hugged each other. 100% pure wild turkey, they said. Nearly 40 years have passed since then. Now there's a vaccine for measles, and the woods where I live are full of wild turkeys, pure wild turkeys. I like to think they are all descendants of those 16 birds I saved from the vigilance of the ornithologists.